So that being said, we're going to start off just real quickly going over a couple of housekeeping items. As you see, this session will be recorded. We will be utilizing this content for future material and training and participants. Also, we do ask your engagement and participation. Feel free to ask questions, but we will also have a Q&A session at the end. And then we also ask that you please keep your audio on mute just to avoid any background noise. All right, let's jump in and let's go to the next slide to give you a little bit of an overview about our campaign and the work that we do. So We're All America started back in 2017 when we really saw the rise in as many of you may recall, during that era, during the Trump era, we saw a rise in xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-refugee, anti-immigrant sentiments and rhetoric rising in this country. And so we had resettlement agencies and immigrant rights organizations come together and really formally launch the We're All America campaign to respond to these needs and attacks we were seeing in the community. And so through our National Steering Committee partners, our organization started out in 5 states, having grassroots organizers who were individuals with lived experience themselves to represent in over 21 states now with our partners. So that's a little bit about our organization. And through that, let's go to the next slide. This last year, we launched a formal national table called the Opportunity for All Table, which is a national leadership table housed out of We Are All America and led by diverse refugee and immigrants to make sure that there's representation, inclusivity of those with lived experience, and ensuring that we shift the narrative of who refugee and immigrants are and their contributions. So that being said, I am going to introduce my amazing facilitator and speaker who will be leading our workshop. Leila Martin Garcia is the Universal Representation Field Manager at National Partnership for New Americans. And as Director of Organizing for our voting rights organization, Leila's leadership catalyzed the power of voters of color and immigrants to make positive changes in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Previously, she was CASA Pennsylvania regional lead organizer, where she led thousands of families to advocate for Puerto Rican equity, climate justice, and immigrant justice. And welcome, Leila, and I turn it over to you for our workshop.
Thank you so much, Neida. It is a pleasure to be with you all today. I would love if you are able to please write your name in the chat, write the organization. I saw that David put already. Chirla is here, Chirla presente. Maybe where you're calling from. I live in Harrisburg in Pennsylvania. And I arrived to this country around 6 years ago. And one of my passions is traveling. So please, share with me where you are based, because I haven't left Pennsylvania. I've only visited other 2 states, and I would love to travel more. So maybe I get some ideas from you all in the chat. So yes, please introduce yourself, and hopefully I'll be able to convince my husband to travel to any of the places that you call home right now. So today I would like to start with the agenda. Andres, if you can pass to the next slide about what we're going to be doing today. And before I start, I would like to say that there's going to be, as Neida mentioned, opportunity to ask questions at the very end. But please, this is a conversation. We are learning together. I tried to put in this PowerPoint and this presentation what I've learned in the last 15 years that I've been organizing in different countries. So please, if you have any comment, any experience that you want to share with us all, if you have any question or any clarification, please just unmute yourself and go ahead, because this is a collective space where we can all learn and appreciate each other. So once I've said that, the agenda for today has 3 main blocks. We're going to learn what is a campaign, right? And why do we do campaigns? Why is that important for us? we're going to learn about how to choose a campaign, right? Like the campaigns don't happen just out of nothing, right? Like we decide to go and fight for something or fight against something because they respond to needs that our community members have. And then the last one, we're going to learn the different elements that all campaigns have and how they're going to help us to build a powerful, efficient campaign. So when you leave today, hopefully, if I did this right, you're going to leave identifying how organizing campaigns can be used to create systemic institutional change, right? How can we make change in those systems, in those conditions that we have right now that don't work for immigrants and refugees? You're going to learn and you're going to leave as well being familiarized with the components of issue campaigning, planning and strategy development, right? We're going to try to see what are the different elements that we need and how that strategy is developed so we can win campaigns, so we can win change. And then the third thing is that we're going to practice. We're going to practice using a campaign strategy chart you can use, in the future to plan your campaigns. Campaigns can be either federal, can be local, can be in your state, any kind of campaign you want, you could use that chart that would be helpful for you. So let's go to the next slide and let's see what is a campaign, what are campaigns, right? When I was trying to find a definition for campaigns, I felt like everything that I found out there was just like not enough, right? So I was thinking, what are the things that come to my head when I think about what is a campaign, right? If I had to explain to my child, what do I do? How would I tell him what I do, right? How would I tell my husband or my mom or my grandma what is a campaign and what do we do? And the first thing that came to my head was there is an organized effort, right? It's not just us going and protesting or us calling our representative just out of nothing. No, it's an organized effort towards a particular goal, right? Like we know what we are doing, we know where we are, we know where we want to get, right? That's our goal. And we are thinking very strategically about how we want to get there. We are organizing ourselves to make sure that that happens. Normally, that goal can be a social or can be a political one, right? I think as well, when I think about campaigning, is not just one thing, it's a series of steps over time that are going to help us to build our power, our strength as a group. And those steps are going to bring us close to victory on that particular issue. So you are hearing already, this is organized, right? This is like different steps that we are taking. This is about issues, right, that we want to change, that we want to improve. And these two things are very close to the next things that we're going to be saying in the next slides. But these two last points, I think, are very important for me, because for me, when I think about campaignings, I don't think just about changing something. I think a lot about the process. And I see campaigns as an opportunity to change community members, people like us, into social change agents, right? I always think about, I don't want anyone to fight for immigrants. I don't want anyone to fight for me. I want to be fighting my own things. I want to be my own liberator. I want to be the one who drives that change because I am an expert and I think I can do it, right? So this is always an opportunity to lift up, to develop, to work with our community members so they know the power they have to make those changes, right? I always say that these systems sometimes don't work, but we are not victims, right? We are agents of change. And I think the last thing that I think as well is that it's very important that our campaigns are led by community members, right? We need to invest and commit to the leadership of our community, of the community that we work with. Before we go to the next slide, I would love to hear from you all. What are the issues? What are the needs? What are the things that you see in your community that you think you would like to change, that you would like to improve, that you would like to stop, right? And they could be potential campaigns. So what are the issues that you care about? And in here, please feel free to unmute yourself and share, or maybe use the chat. I can hold silence for a very long time. So I hope somebody's like, yes, I'm going to share what issue is important to me or what issue is important to my community.
If I may, Leila, with your permission, this is David from Churla. Thank you very much for being with us and for guiding us on this. One of the main issues that we deal with here in Los Angeles, actually in the state of California, if not the entire country, is for the particular population that I'm currently working with, which are the Afghans. We need to have a pathway to permanent residency, which currently is the Afghan Adjustment Act. We need to advocate for this at every level, high, low, middle, it doesn't matter, because this is going to open doors, not just for the population to better assimilate and contribute to this country. Additionally, it will take a lot of stress off the already inundated and backlogged system that we have, should this wind up in the ASIP, in the SIV column. So the major obstacle at this point is what I'm discussing with you is a pathway to permanent residency. This does not mean that we don't have other issues to include housing and many others, but this seems to be at the forefront, whether we realize it now or later. It's something that we have to move forward with, and by the grace of God, this will get passed. Thank you. Back to you, Leila.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, pathway to citizenship, right? That responds to a need, as David explained perfectly, right? That our communities have. I'm seeing in the chat, I see Malena saying deportation defense. I see clearing the backlog for asylum seekers and family petitions, protection for oh, that word is so hard for me, unaccompanied children, indigenous people, political rights and participation. Yes. Does any one of you in the chat or not in the chat would like to unmute themselves and share a little bit with us?
Hi, my name is Kosada. I'm with the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, as well as We Are All America. And I guess like one campaign that we are hoping to embark on as Turk is a, so I don't know why I'm blanking. Oh, like we're thinking maybe like kickstarting our our tuition equity campaign. Right now in Tennessee, undocumented students can't access in-state tuition. And so we've campaigned on this in the past. We fell short by one vote in 2016. And so now I think we're just trying to see if that's something that we want to try again. Obviously, it's something that we're always advocating for, but trying to see if we need to adjust our campaign or what strategy can we take, just because when we did that campaign, it was like pre-Trump administration. So the landscape has probably changed since then.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing tuition equity. I've been fighting that as well in Pennsylvania for 4 years. And still we're still not there. Such an important campaign that we need to win for sure, to have equity in education. Somebody else would like to share? Maybe one more person? Don't be shy, please. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to share. So if you are like, oh, I don't want to take the space, take it.
Yeah. Hi, Leila. How are you? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? So I'm Kauser Mini, North California refugee organizer with Churla, and I'm speaking from Northern California. And good afternoon, everyone. I would like to just share my recent experience working and building a campaign. Last year, I started a campaign under the name of Stand for Girls' Education in Afghanistan, when the Taliban has been stopped girls' education in Afghanistan for the middle school and also college and high school. And hopefully that campaign got very viral. And last week, it's a great news that I joined United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York, and I just released the Alliance for Afghan Women Resilience. And the Secretary Blinken personally support this statement, and I was successfully able to got the attention of United Nations General Assembly and also Secretary Blinken to help and release this alliance. And this is how we could work in campaign. And I was just starting at some point to just support the women right and just access the women's back in Afghanistan to their fundamental right. But in a big scoop, and yesterday, last week, another tragedy which happened in Iran, young lady protester has been killed, and somehow I would like to merge the Iranian women's rights also with this Alliance for Afghan Women Resilience, because this is all about women's and women's rights. And it doesn't matter in which part of the world what is happening with this women, but they're all humans and they all count as a women gender. So, and thank you so much, Leila, for asking to share the experience. And this is a great opportunity if someone needs to learn more about how to develop the campaign, how to release campaign, how work in campaign. It's really interesting, but it's a huge work. You need to do a lot of networking. You need to do a lot of research. You need to do a lot of push and pressure. Since last year, finally this year, this is something happening actually. And this is something that the words just taking an action into it. So this is not easy thing, but just thank you so much for letting us to share this experience.
Of course, thank you all for sharing. And I think this is a perfect segue into the next slide, into why. Why do we do campaigns, right? And I think you all touch on like, these are needs, right? That our communities have. These are things that we have to change, right? This is what we do campaigns because we want to tackle them. And I think it was David that was mentioning, I know there are other things, but this one is really important. Yeah, the fact that we are focusing on one campaign doesn't mean that what we are doing right now is not gonna add to what is coming later, right? I always say that when I used to organize in CASA, I used to say community members, like, and when we get the immigration reform, when we get citizenship for all, right, for the 11 million, what, our lives are going to be better? Yes, of course. But are we stopping right there when minimum wage is still like $7 an hour in Pennsylvania? Are we going to be stopping right there when we know housing and affordable housing is an issue? No, probably not, right? So even if we decide to focus on one issue, everything that we are learning, every victory that we have is going to take us to the next one, right? It's just going to add value to what we continue doing. So let's think why we do them, right? One thing that is super important when we think about campaigns, and I think I've heard something about that, about networking, right? It's about building power and strengthen alliances with other organizations, with other groups, right? Like we know we're going to be stronger when we bring other people to our campaigns. And that doesn't mean that, and sometimes people are like, oh, I don't know why you say this. That doesn't mean that they have to be in the forefront. They can be allies. They can be taking other components in the campaign, right? Like I always think I'm an immigrant, but I am not, for example, a DACA recipient or a dreamer. I am never going to be at the forefront of that fight. I'm going to be supporting my dreamers like nobody else. I'm going to be the best ally possible. I'm part of that campaign, but that doesn't mean that I have to be leading that part of the campaign, right? So building other groups doesn't mean that we're going to lose power. It just means that we're going to be stronger because we're going to be able to have more people supporting that cause. Something that is very important, and we talk about this, right? This is a way to develop our community members, but it's as well a way for them to directly confront decision makers and give them a sense of their own power. I remember when I first came to this country, I remember actually my first day at work, I was able to go to Congress in Washington, D.C., and I talked to my senator, the senator of Pennsylvania. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm nobody here, and I'm here talking to a senator. I remember that I'm normally like, I'm very small, like I'm not tall or anything. I swear, when I left that meeting, I felt like I was like 2 meters high and the most muscle person in the world. I felt so powerful and so strong because I realized at that moment, the power that I had. I was talking to my senator, like just in front of me, telling just, I didn't talk, but just, I could hear other people saying, the things that they had to share to him. And that is power right there. Them being able to change, and challenge decision makers. I think something, and you all talk about this, right? Like why? Because these campaigns address root causes of problems and conditions that affect us, right? Like we know that when we win our campaigns, we are changing those systems that oppress our community members, that makes our lives not to the fullest as they should be, right? And addressing those needs, addressing those root causes, we know that that is very, very powerful. This is something that to me is very important, the last 2 points. We can move people into thinking beyond their immediate needs and self-interest. We are making sure that solidarity is one of our pillars when we are doing campaigning, right? And that is super, super important. We know that, and it shouldn't be like way, right? We're talking about women's rights. We know that we're gonna need as well men supporting our movement, right? We have to, and men need to think like, oh, that is not just a women's thing. No, right? We need to make sure that people think beyond their immediate needs. And the last one, and I always joke, if I had $1 every time I heard this sentence, I would probably be rich right now. I could like retire. But this one is extremely important because the media, and we see it so much out there that sometimes we even believe it ourselves. But we need to change and challenge how people talk about us, how some people talk about refugees, how they talk about immigrants, right? And that starts by making sure that people like us are leading our campaigns and making sure that we don't talk anyone to describe us, right? I don't know if you remember when Trump first got into office and he was describing Mexicans in certain ways. I had so many Mexican community members saying, I am not this, I am not what he's saying, instead of saying what they really are. Why? Because somebody else already tried to define you, and the only thing that we could do was defend ourselves by saying we are not. That is somebody else creating the narrative and how we talk about ourselves, right? The sentence that I've heard the most, and that's the one that if I got $1, I would be rich right now, was like, oh, I'm a good refugee, I'm a good immigrant, right? Like the bad ones, no, the bad ones don't deserve to be here, or like, like I deserve to be here, I earn it. No, this is not like we need to talk about our values, about welcoming, right? About all of us having a space in this country, right? About all of us calling this country home right now. So it's very important that we're thinking about campaigns. We always think about how is the way that I want people to talk about me, about my community, and about my campaign. I don't want others to decide about that. So I would like to play a quick video. It's like 1.5 minutes, because I think in this video, you can really see all the reasons why we do campaigns. Andres, if you are...
And their families knows what it's like to be waiting and to be fighting and to put everything on the line. We keep on putting everything on the line for our people.
We're in DC right now with hundreds, maybe even thousands of immigrant activists who have come from over 20 states across the country to deliver a message directly to Congress, especially to congressional Democrats, that this is the year now for citizenship.
We're here to make some noise and to make sure our voices are heard.
Democrats hold majority power today. So our message to them is loud and clear. You go out and you find a way.
We will march. We will demonstrate and demand that they deliver citizenship, status, and protections for all of our community. We will keep this movement alive until we get to yes.
I am a DACA recipient. I know that what I have today with my permit was due to so many people showing up and fighting for me, so now is the time that I want to do the same.
It is time to deliver citizenship, for America's 11 million undocumented immigrants. We are America, Mr. President, and we are home.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andres, for playing that video. I was that day in Washington, D.C. In that March. But for me, this video is like very emotional because I can see all the things that we're talking, why we do campaigns. I'm able to see in that video, but I'm also like, I remember, like how we were addressing a need, right? Like we were fighting for citizenship for all, right? I was seeing like community members stepping up. I was seeing like all the like people challenging the status quo and the decision makers. And, I think somebody says, we're here to say Biden or to say Congress, right? Like to do this. And I think they capture in that minute and a half, like why we're doing what all of us, we do what we do. So we're gonna go to the next slide and we're gonna start the second block about how to choose a campaign. And if you are able to see the GIF, this is not how we choose campaigns, right? We're not gonna spin a wheel and be like, oh, there are like 14 things that I care about. Let's spin the wheel and see which one, we select today. Normally, this is not how we do it. We do it with the next slide. This is what I've been using in the past, and I found that it's a very successful way to choose a campaign, especially if you are part of organizations that are member-led, like your members. You gather and your members say, these are my issues, these are my needs, and these are like, and you come together with a campaign to address those issues. This is a very effective way on how to frame that conversation and how to think about your campaign, right? The first, there's three elements, right? Is the three parts of the triangle. The first one is winning structural reform, and we're gonna go into detail into all of them. Winning structural reform means that we're going to be addressing changes that are like the underlying causes of the problems that we have, right? The second element is building our movement. And I think we talk about this, right? We want to make sure that this campaign help us to be stronger, to have more resources, to have more media presence, to have more community members, to have more allies. We want to grow, right? We want to build our strength. And the last one, as I mentioned before, the narrative, right? We have to make sure that always our campaigns challenge the narrative that are not good for us, and we don't get into that. But the contrary, we are putting out there, we are talking about that issue, we are talking about tuition equity, the way we want to be talking, right? Because we know that we want to be talking about equity, we want to be talking about access to education, right? So let's go to the next slide, and let's go a little bit deeper about the first element. Winning structural reform. I put in here more than a definition. I put some questions that I found are useful when you are deciding your campaign. Like when you are thinking, okay, let's talk about tuition equity, right? As I mentioned before, is tuition equity something that tackles structural change? Is it challenging the system, right? Or am I staying on the surface? The first question I ask myself is like, is this responding to a need of my community? Yeah, right? Because right now in Pennsylvania or in Tennessee, students that are not citizens or green card holders, they don't have access to, for example, like scholarships or have access to some colleges, right? So yeah, we know that when we have tuition equity, these folks are going to be able to get into college and being able to afford it. The second one, I do think about like, okay, when we win this, how is my community going to be better? Well, I can see it already. Like we're going to have folks that are going to be able to study. They're going to be able to do to fulfill their dreams, right? I ask myself, okay, is this something that we can win, something concrete, improvement? And sometimes some people don't agree with it about the 1 year kind of timeline. The 1 year improvement doesn't mean that you have to win the campaign this year. That doesn't mean that. That just means that in all campaigns, especially when you are involving community members, you want to make sure that you have clear milestones. And you want to make sure that when you have your plan, within a year, you have something that people can feel energized, right? I'll be talking about the campaign that I'm very involved right now, but it's a 6 to 8 year campaigns. Some people, if you ask them like, I need you to fight with me for 8 years, people are going to be like, okay, but after like 3 years of like not winning anything, people are going to be like, I don't know, I'm getting kind of tired and we're not getting anything, right? So always make sure that if your campaign is a multi-year campaign, always make sure that you're going to have improvement or you have some kind of milestones that are going to help you, one, to guide your work towards your ultimate goal, but at the same time to energize your base and energize yourself, to continue for the next years. And then the next one, right? Like when you think about your campaigns, they have to fit within your overall strategy, right? Maybe 5 years. So make sure that they align, right? With the things that you are going to be doing. And in here, in this iceberg, you can see an example, right? Like when we're thinking about racism, right? We have the things that are like on the top, right? That are very important. And of course, we need to tackle. But there are many other things that are underneath that a lot of people don't associate with racism, for example, that are very important that we need to find. And these are the campaigns that we want to be fighting to make sure that we are not just staying on the surface. Does this mean that you cannot have campaigns that are not like, tackling the underlying issues? Yes, you can, but just make sure that always they fit within your overall strategy, right? You don't want to be always in the surface, because then you're not going to see the change that your members, your community members are asking. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the second element, which is building our movement, right? And again, right, when you're thinking about this campaign, think always as an opportunity for your community members to grow, for your organization to grow, for your specific group to grow. So always ask yourself, like, is this campaign going to help me recruit more community members? And I can give you an example. When we were doing driver's license in Pennsylvania, we don't have driver's licenses for all. If you are undocumented in Pennsylvania, you cannot drive legally. You don't have a driver's permit. I think right now there's 17 states in the United States that allow that. Pennsylvania is not one of them. When we decided to go for this campaign, I remember people from all over the state were calling us like, I want to join this campaign. This is so important for me. I just got fined and I've been fined 3 times and I'm going to have to go to jail, but I have to drive because public transportation is not a reality in Pennsylvania. Like, I want to be part of this, right? So I remember our base grew like from like maybe 200 people to like 2,000. It was crazy. People really wanted to join that. We have to ask ourselves, is this going to help me? Is it going to help us to bring strategic allies, right? Like, or like deepen our relationships? Like, always think about like, how can I use that to make sure that like I'm making my organization better with other organizations, right? We don't want to be fighting with other organizations. We want to be together, right? This one, you don't have to use it, but it's something that we used it. We use campaigns to move into other counties within Pennsylvania to expand our brand as CASA. You don't have to do all of them, but these are like questions that you can ask yourself to see if you're really building a movement and you are using your campaign as an opportunity for growth or for deepening. This one is important as well, right? Like social media matters. We have a digital presence, right? Like, can this help you grow your social media followers, right? Can it help you grow donations? We all need money, right? How can I use this campaign to bring more money to my organization, right? And the last question is super, super important. Are we the right people to lead this? And I think it's a question that we should all ask. Sometimes organizations, we just want to do stuff because we care and we are so passionate about it. But sometimes maybe we are not the best people. Maybe our role within the campaign is a different one and not leading. That is okay. That is so okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. And I saw a question in the chat. I will answer as soon as I finish with this slide. I don't want to disregard that at all. The narrative, we already mentioned it, right? Like, are we centering the right voices? Are we centering the directly affected people in this campaign? This is super important, right? Like, we don't want people fighting for us. We want to be fighting ourselves, right? We want to be changing the structures that don't work ourselves, right? So we need to make sure that we center those voices, right? Does this campaign operate from a perspective of powers and strength, or from a victimization, right? Are we going like, oh, poor us, you know, we need your help? Or are we being like, hey, this is not working and we're going to change it, and we're going to change it this way, right? And the last one, false narratives. I used to work, I used to do a lot of electoral work. And, you know, I was like, but you know, why do you need to register voters? Like, if people don't want to register, it's because they don't want to. It's because they are lazy or they don't care. And I would have to answer those kind of questions. That is a false narrative. And this is a narrative that disempower us as a community, right? So when I'm launching an electoral campaign and I'm going to be like, I'm talking about the power of our vote. I'm talking about how much we can change in the upcoming elections, right? I'm talking about like our voices being heard. And I'm not talking about like some people calling me lazy because I don't want to register to vote, right? Because first of all, like the obstacles that we have in some states to even register to vote and to actually being able to get to the polls, right? So it's very important that, you know, when you're thinking of your campaign and you're creating your communication strategy and your narrative, think about a way that is not disempowering you. And if people want to take you there, especially like media, they're trying to ask you these kind of questions, always pivot and always go to what you want to say. Always go to what is important to your campaign and your message and your community members. So let's go to the next slide. All right, before we play the video, I would like to answer the question, what tools do you suggest are good to maintain the contact list while building the movement? I've used several tools that I liked. This one that I really loved called Membership Drive. I don't think it's free, unfortunately, but it was beautiful because you were able, for example, to create your own petitions in there, and people, you know, the moment people would fill it in, and those are like electronic, right? They are digital. But you know, like people were able to do it right there, and you know, you could classify folks in level of interest, in issues and stuff like that. So Membership Drive was an amazing one. Then the Voter Access Network is very useful as well, and you can use that as a non-partisan. And those two were probably my favorites. And of course, you know, you always have beautiful Google Excels and stuff like that to keep track of your folks. But those two were two of my favorites. I'll put my email in the chat as well later, and I'm always happy to talk to anyone that is organizing and would like to, you know, to further the conversation. I see a hand raise. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Chioma Nnaji. I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, primarily organizing African immigrant communities here, and also regionally in New England. One of the things that we are trying to figure out, which is the reason why I asked that question, is that, you know, we're building our base right now to get ready to do some campaign work. And so one of the things that we're trying to figure out is a software that'll allow us to do mass texting, because for our community, that's the best way. You know, posting on social media or, you know, handing out flyers is not necessarily the best way. Using text message and going through WhatsApp groups is the best way to organize. And right now we have a voter registration list for 3 of the major cities here in Massachusetts. And so we want to be able to use the phone numbers to do some direct organizing. And so that's why I was asking that question, particularly around text messaging. I've been introduced to a couple, but either one I was introduced to is used in sort of political organizing, terribly expensive. And then the other 2 are opt-in softwares. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I'll be happy to talk further for the sake of time, but my favorite for texting has always been Hustle. That is my favorite. But you have to pay. It's a bit expensive. But I'll be happy to talk because I had very bad experiences too, so I can tell you as well what I didn't like. But happy to chat offline. So right now I'm going to play you a video. It's around 2 minutes. This is about the campaign that I'm currently leading here within the MPNA Familia, with the National Partnership for New Americans Familia. It's about universal representation. So if you are like, oh, I don't know what universal representation is, I see the PowerPoint going crazy. There we go. You know, you're gonna learn this video, but I would like you to just watch the video. It's around 2 minutes, and then we talk very briefly, or maybe you put in the chat about, do you feel this campaign fulfills the triangle, the 3 elements? Like, are we trying to, you know, like respond to a need that we have? Are we building a movement? Although it's a bit hard to see by the video, that question. And then is this changing the narrative? So if we can please play the video, and then we can just comment in the chat about how
Imagine a nightmare. For some reason, you're detained by the government and have to face America's criminal justice system. Can't afford a lawyer? The court has appointed a public defender to represent you. Were you not told of your right to a lawyer? The entire case against you can get thrown out. That right to a lawyer, known as the right to counsel, is preserved in our Constitution as the 6th Amendment, so you don't have to face the justice system alone. But for some of our neighbors, that nightmare can get a whole lot worse. Just imagine facing that system without the guarantee of counsel, because that's what happens to more than half of all people who face our immigration courts every year. In immigration court, unlike criminal court, there's no legal right to a public defender for an immigrant who can't afford a lawyer, even though deportation often threatens one's life and freedom. Whether that's a child separated from their mother at the border, or a longtime permanent resident, or a father who's facing deportation after a speeding ticket. The most vulnerable among us have no right to counsel, while the government trying to deport them always has counsel. That's a system that sets up immigrants to fail. In 2016, it failed more than 73,000 people. And that number keeps on growing, especially among immigrants of color. That's why now more than ever, communities across America support what is known as universal representation, a public defender system for immigrants facing deportation. Universal representation means that immigrants who can't afford a lawyer can get one. Because the truth is, many facing deportation do have valid legal claims to stay, but they can't present these claims without legal help. A recent study showed that only 5% of deportation cases won the right to stay without a lawyer, while cases with a lawyer were 10.5 times more likely to be granted that right. Expanding universal representation programs can help build the national movement to support due process for all people at risk of deportation, so that families stay united and communities can thrive. We're all taught to believe that everyone gets their fair day in court. Everyone should mean everyone. To learn more about universal representation, visit vera.org.
All right. Awesome.
Imagine a nightmare. For some reason, you're detained by the government and have to face
We're so
America's...
excited about universal representation that we want to keep playing it. So we don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, so we're going to move forward and we won't have time to have a lot of this conversation, but please feel free to comment that, right? Like, I think it's very important, right? We talk about systems. We're not talking about people having money or not having money to pay lawyers. It's about a system. This system is failing, right? Like, this is about establishing a right. The same way we have in the criminal legal system, right? Where everybody has access to a lawyer. That's what we're talking about. You know, every immigrant facing deportation should have that right. So, you know, this is a campaign that is you know, it's going to take us 6 to 8 years to win. But it's something that we are doing right now. And we are building this movement, right? We are really trying to tell, like, this is a step forward, you know, to an immigration reform that we desperately need, for instance, because we know that alone is not going to fix all of the issues that we have. So let's talk about building a people power campaign. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to be talking about 6 different elements that we have in a campaign and that we should all be thinking when we are planning our campaign, right? The first one is the goal, right? You need to know very clearly in one sentence, what is your goal? What do you want? right? When you're thinking like, oh, what do you do? When I think about universal representation, what do I want? I want to establish a right that gives any immigrant facing deportation a lawyer. I want to pass universal representation nationally. That's my goal, right? That's what I want, right? What is gonna, like think about those questions that I put in there. Then if we win, people are gonna have access to lawyers, right? Think, very important, the third point in here, think about your short and intermediate partial victories, right? Like we mentioned this before. This campaign is going to be 8 years. If we don't do anything, people are going to be like dropping like flies. They're going to be like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, I mean, you haven't done anything, So always think about when you have a long campaign like this one, always think about what are the things that you can do next. For example, in our campaign is going to be, like putting the legislation together, because there was not even a law. Nobody thought about this before in Congress, in a national level. So we put a legislation together that it was written, I saw somebody from Chirla, by people like, by organizations like Chirla, like CASA, like, of course, MPNA that we are here, like many folks participating into putting that legislation right there, right? That to me, it's a short goal, right? Short-term goal. Think always about like, what is the next thing? Well, the next thing is having a hearing, right? Having that legislation introduced, right? Always think about what are the steps, what are the milestones that you're going to have in your campaign, particularly if you have a very long campaign. You're going to need that, right? And the goals, always make sure, right, that your community members, they have an input in this. Target is who has the power to give this to us, right? So in our case, we is a legislation that we want to pass in Congress. So who has the power? The politicians that are in Congress right now, our senators and our House of Representatives, right? If you, for example, are trying to pass a resolution in your city, well, it's going to be your city council members, and it's going to be as well maybe your mayor, right? Always think about like, who is the person that has the power to make that happen, right? And as well, who has the power to influence these people? If you are unable to get that person, how are you going to be able to get there? Who can help you, right? Who has influence on your target? So for example, when I think about our campaign in the Fairness to Freedom, right? In the Universal Representation campaign, what we are doing? Well, we are talking to, for example, not just yet, but we're going to start talking, for example, to we're talking to different lawyers, for example, that have power. We're trying to talk to the private sector, to different companies, right? That some of them have to put money themselves to support their employees for a lawyer, for example. So think about who is in there that can help you to influence that person. Let's go to the next slide. These two next elements are, I think, very important internally when you think about like your baseline power is a fancy way, I think, to say is like, where are you right now, right? Like, do you have community members that care about that issue? What are the resources that you have? Because sometimes it's like we all want to fight for so many things. There are so many things that we need to improve, but sometimes we don't have the capacity. We don't have the staff. We don't have the money, right? And when we are creating a campaign, we need to make sure that we are able to have it, that we have our internal power, our internal capacity to be able to do that. And we have to be realistic on our capacity when we are planning that campaign, right? So otherwise you're setting yourself for failure, and it's not your fault. You're just trying to do something that you don't have the hands that you need to make it happen. Organizational building. This is as well, we mentioned about this, right? This is about building your movement, right? This is about how can you use, how this campaign is going to help you to grow, right? To maybe not grow yourself as an organization or your members, right? How this campaign fits into a bigger campaign, for example, right? Like sometimes we prefer to start with something maybe a little bit smaller. That is okay, right? Because we know that's going to help us. That is going to be a victory that is going to add value to the next campaign. And that is okay, right? Like, for example, I think about, the Green New Deal. When I was in Casa, Pennsylvania, we were trying to pass a legislation, to make sure that we take care of our planet, that we have clean water and clean air. But we know that was going to be very, very, very hard. So we were like, what about if we just try to do that in our city? right? Like instead of trying to convince all the politicians in Washington, let's try to do that in our city and see if we can pass some kind of law or legislation that does that, but in a city level, right? And we did it. And we did it in one city. And then from that city, we were able to do it to the county. For example, in the county, we didn't do it. Or at least I left CASA before it was done, but it was not done by the time. But that helped us, that victory helped us to go to the next one, right? So always think about how this campaign, you may not fix all the problems and all the issues that you want to tackle, but it's adding to your next step. Let's go to the next slide and to the last two elements of the campaign. Threats and opponents. I don't think I'm going to say anything that you don't know, that in our movement, in the immigrant and refugee movement, we have a lot of threats and a lot of people that oppose us, right? So always make sure that you assess the current situation and think in advance on who you think is going to be opposing to your campaign, who is going to be opposed to that change, and think about how strong they are. So you are able to either neutralize them or to overcome their obstacles and their opposition, right? And that is an analysis that not a lot of people do. And we have to, we don't have any options. So for example, when I think about this campaign, the universal representation campaign, I think about who many people that oppose this idea, and actually private lawyers. We thought like some private lawyers are not going to be happy about the idea of like us providing, lawyers that are funded by the government, because they are going to run out of business. Does it mean that they are a threat? No, they may not be a threat, but they may oppose this kind of campaign, right? Because it's going to affect them negatively, right? So we were thinking about, okay, how do we overcome that? Well, let's bring the lawyers that actually support this, for example, right? So always think about who is out there that may not be a natural ally to you, right? May oppose what you're trying to do. And of course, we're always going to have politicians that don't care about us, that don't want us to be in this country, or people that feel that way about us. But try to think as well about those other people that are not so clear. They don't come first in mind, but they may be as well in that, part of like opponents or threats to your campaign. And the last thing, tactics, that is my favorite, right? Because this is actually how you implement absolutely anything in your campaign, right? How are you gonna demonstrate your power in this campaign? And there are many tactics that you can be doing, right? You can go to rallies, you can do press conferences, you can do trainings, you can do fellowships. Like there are many ways that you're gonna be using these tactics to build your own power and your own capacity, right? So make sure that when you're thinking about that, there are many, many things that you can do. Think about tactics in a way that makes sense in your campaign. Like, for example, in the Fairness to Freedom campaign, right? The campaign for universal representation. Am I going to go protest and try to organize a protest in Congress right now? No, doesn't make sense. Because even if we do, it's going to be for nothing. So my tactics right now are all based into building the field, into building the capacity, into doing training so people know what universal representation is, into helping people to tell the stories, right? So we can be at the forefront and center of this campaign. There are like 1,000 tactics, actually 1,001 tactics that you can use, so not always mobilization is the right answer. Sometimes building in, yourself internally as a movement, as an organization, is as important as your external tactics. So always keep that in mind. All right, let's go to the next slide. Oh my goodness, we're so bad at timing. I wanted you all to practice a little bit, and we were going to have a campaign where you're going to think about the goal, the target, your baseline power, and all the elements that we just mentioned. But Neida, you tell me, you're the boss. Do you want us to practice, or do you want us to go just to questions?
So my suggestion would be if we could extend a couple of minutes, if Leila, you're okay with that, and folks that can stay on, maybe if we can extend 5-10 more minutes to share a little bit about how to practice, and totally understand for folks who need to jump off, that's totally fine. We will send the slides and the recording after, but maybe if we can say 10 minutes after, we'll do a quick practice and then wrap up. and do Q&A and wrap up. Does that work? And if you need to jump off, that's totally fine.
Thank you, Neida. And I do apologize. I promise I timed myself, before I wanted to do this, but I just have the gift of speaking and I'm so sorry. So let's practice. Let's go to the next slide. We put a link to a Jamboard. So please, if you are able to click the link in the, Neida, can we, there we go. If you can click that link, I would like us to think about a campaign to pass driver's licenses for all, right? Making sure that everyone has access to a driver's license, regardless of their immigration status. So let's think about the elements or how we will build that campaign. You can use the Jamboard to answer the question. You can unmute yourself, or you can use the chat. You can do however you feel more comfortable, but I do ask you for the sake of time that if you know the answer, just go ahead and do it. So what is the goal of this campaign? What are we trying to do with that?
Feel free to unmute yourself or put in the Jamboard. And for those of you who don't know how to use the Jamboard, you will click on the left-hand side. There is a sticky note. You just click on that and it'll put it in. You can write in there.
So what would be the goal of this campaign, the driver's licenses campaign? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to win? I know you all know it. I can feel it that you all know it.
Hi, all. This is Adamu with Church for Service. One of the goals of the campaign is to get at least the state legislature to pass a bill that will allow a driver's license for all, regardless of status.
That is absolutely right. Thank you. Thank you. That is it, right? Like our goal is to pass the legislation in our state to give access to driver's licenses for all. Awesome. Perfect. All right, let's go to the second element of the campaign.
I have a question. Your campaign can have more than one goal?
Yes. Yes,
yeah,
it can.
I would say that the goal also is to educate community members around the value of having a driver's license and or sort of, I don't know, protocol around it or something. I think there's always an element of educating constituents about it.
Yes, that's absolutely right, right? When we think about the goal of our campaigns, we need to think about like the sub goals, right? Or the short-term intermediate goals that we're gonna have, right? So the final goal is not to have people just educated, right? The final goal is to have the legislation. But a goal that we're gonna have in our campaign is to make sure that people are educated about this. Absolutely. All right. Let's go to the next one, target. Who can make that happen? Who can give us driver's licenses for all? Who has that power? Is it Biden? Is it Congress? It's actually...
I think this is a state thing, so it will be the state legislators.
Correct, it's the state. Normally the power is on the states. That's correct, it's on the state. The police, they don't have the power to give us the driver's licenses, but they are for sure a very important people that you're gonna have to keep in this campaign. All right, let's go to the next one. Baseline power. What are the things that we're gonna need as an organization to make this happen? What are the things that are important? Stories, yes, stories. We're going to have to tell these people why this matters, and people who don't have to drive their license are going to have to explain why, right? They need to drive their children to school. They need to go to hospitals. They need to go to work. Yes. Is there anything else? Statistics. I'm loving it. Yes, statistics. Yes. Yeah, driver's license has a huge impact on the well-being of people. And there are research that shows that. Yes.
Do we also need allies?
Yes, we need allies. Yes, that's correct. Like one of the biggest allies that we had in Pennsylvania for this campaign were the farmers, because they employ a lot of immigrants and they were like these farming companies. They were big allies of that campaign, for example. Yes, perfect. All right, there's many other things that we can have, but let's go to the next one. All right, we've done half of the campaign already. Number 4, organizational building. How can we use this campaign? How can we use this campaign to grow our own power, our organization, or our members? How can we use this? Is this campaign, when we win this campaign, are we done? Are we gonna just like, okay, now we can retire because we want driver's license? Or we think we can use this campaign to advocate for something else? Or is there, oh, I see in here, build a national coalition. Yes, yes, right? Like I always say, when we were trying to pass this in Pennsylvania, I was saying, this is not something that Pennsylvania is making up. There's already 17 states that have that, right? Like we are creating a movement, a national movement towards that. Yes. Anybody else? Let's remember, right? Every campaign you do, when you have people like telling their stories, those are skills that they can use for any other campaign, right? Those are skills that they can use all the time. When you are investing in your members, that is not just for one campaign or for one moment. This is something that they can use for the rest of their lives. And even they can use it in their professional career, right? Like if you are able to speak in front of 1,000 people, you're going to nail a job interview because you're not going to get nervous anymore, right? Because you already know how to do the public speaking and how to like tell the story about yourself, right? All right, let's go to the next. Oh, yeah.
No, I was going to say also we need to identify people with different skill sets that can help us do some online mobilization, get people out and do some graphic things that can get people's attention on the issue.
Yes. Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, like can I use, for example, that I did that, for example. I remember when I was doing electoral work, we would get so much money to get people to register to vote because Pennsylvania is such an important state, right? And I was like, I'm going to use this money, for example, to buy a lot of hoodies and a lot of, do a lot of like digital stuff that I can use for another thing, for example. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to the next one. And I think we have 2 more. Threats. Who do you think is going to oppose to all folks having driver's licenses? Who's going to be against us? Conservatives. They always are, right? They always are. They don't like anything that says immigrant or refugee in it. Anti-immigrants, anti-refugee, yes.
This might not be directly what you're asking, but I think a threat for me would be around the narrative of not ensuring it's not connected to sort of enforcement, ICE. And so ways in which we're saying we want this bill, but we want to make sure that there is still no connection to, because we know that we're talking about undocumented individuals. So thinking about how to craft the narrative around that.
Yeah.
To include them, I should say.
Yes, and this is very important, right? Like some of you, if you have been involved in the driver's license campaign, you know there are different driver's licenses. They are marked and unmarked. And some of them marked means that it's very easy for a police officer or for somebody, to realize if that person got a driver's license being a documented person or undocumented, right? And we know right now that ICE, at least in Pennsylvania, I do know for a fact that ICE uses the Department of Transport database to target people. So if you got a fine and in that paper was put in there that you didn't have a license, we've seen in Pennsylvania that a few weeks later you have ICE knocking at your door, for example, and that's how they find you, through the Department of Transportation database, for instance. All right. Always think about threats, not just our, regular enemies, right? But think as well about some folks that, may potentially not be happy about this idea of Yeah.
Can I say, like, I know some people who will lose if everybody starts driving in the immigrant community, those who benefit by driving people who are undocumented, taxi cab operators, maybe because they feel like, oh, everybody's driving now, we will lose some money.
Right. Right. So always think about, like how you can be ready to overcome those obstacles for sure. And let's do the last one. Tactics. What can we do? What can we do to pass this legislation? What are the tactics that we're going to use to make sure that we build our power and it takes us to the finish line? What can we do? Storytelling. Yes, the storytelling. Always. Yes. Meet with legislators. Yes. Grassroots lobby, right? Like always lobbying. And let's remember, right? Like talk to legislatures is a non-partisan thing. We're talking about an issue, right? Like we are not, if you are an organization that is non-partisan, meeting with legislatures and doing lobbying is totally okay.
Maybe linking it to other campaigns.
Yes, right. Creating that like cross campaign world. And that's like, yeah, building our movement. Yes. And linking it to other campaigns. And this is very true, right? Like we know that if we are able to pass driver's licenses, most probably other campaigns that have like, as recipients, immigrants and refugees, like for example, tuition equity or even universal representation would be probably, we will be able to link it in there. Yes. Digital days of action. Yes. Public engagement from the start. Yes. Education. Yes. All of it.
I want to say alongside the storytelling, like having an op-ed written on the issue in the local media, just to get everybody's attention and sharing a story in the op-ed of how people are impacted and how our neighbors are the ones who will kind of make impact and get more support from the broader community on the issue.
Yes. Like we know there's something that in our movement, and I saw it, for example, in the Dream Act campaign, was humanizing the issue, right? Like people saw dreamers as human beings, right? And that's why like 80% of the country believe that dreamers have the right to stay in here, right? So humanizing the issue is super important. Victor, you are my friend. You said protest in there. We are friends right now because that's my favorite one. Civil disobedience, another favorite one that I have. I myself got arrested in this country 3 times. So, like civil disobedience, I'm loving it. Press conferences. Yes. All right. I think tactics is your how do you say that in English? Like your thing, right? Like is your dance. All right. So I think that's all from my side. I'm happy to stay. My husband is putting my child to sleep, so I can stay as long as you want me to stay. But if there's any question, and of course, Baby Yoda here saying you are the best because you are, and if Baby Yoda says it, you all have to agree. But yeah, if there's any other question or any comment or anything, I will put my email in the chat again. I'm super, super happy to keep having this conversation forward. But any other question right now, please jump and ask. All right. If not, I do apologize for keeping you 10 minutes more, but I was just too excited to shut myself up. So I apologize about that. But thank you all so much for attending this training. It's been a pleasure to know you all and to share this hour and 10 minutes with you. And Neida, please forgive me about the time. Hopefully you'll invite me again to this amazing
No worries. Can we give a round of applause, virtual round of applause for our amazing facilitator, Leila, who did a great job. She'll put her email in case y'all have questions. And then just a quick reminder for those of you who love this training, you should join us for next month's training, which is going to be focusing on resources and tools for ethnic community-based organizations. So if you know anyone who is an ECBO or wants to have their own ECBO organizations, we're going to share resources and tools. So join us October 20th. We will definitely share it out. Thank you all so much. And we'll send out the recording and slides to you all. Have a good evening.